We want to welcome folks to the JoCo for June, as we continue our series. And as always, we always start by acknowledging that we here, the JoCo, do this work on the unceded lands of the Tongva. We ask participants, please, if you are on the Zoom, mute your mic and keep your video off if you're not speaking. And we recommend that you select speaker view so that you can see our guest on your screen. And please use the chat or the raise hand icon for any questions. So as I said, we're continuing our series. And really, we're coming to the end of our series as we wanted to think about the world we're trying to create, the world we want, those of us who are coming from the Black radical tradition, revolutionary traditions, African internationalist, Pan-Africanist traditions, to start thinking about that world we're trying to create, the one we imagine, the one we vision. And in doing so, we decided to use the 9 areas of people activity as outlined by Neely Fuller and popularized by Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. We've gone through all of them. We've come to entertainment. And under entertainment, we are wanting to look at the various aspects of what falls under that, starting with media. Media and the common consciousness. Media creates a common frame of reference, a common consciousness for societies, from the rock paintings of the Sahara and the Kalahari to the instantaneous global communications of the digital age. As contiguous societies grow larger and face-to-face interpersonal exchange becomes more truncated, this function becomes more critical. We rely on media mechanisms to select, show, and interpret world events and to indicate what we must do about those events. When mass media is organized around corporate interests, the effects are clear. Commodity fetishism, individualism, social alienation, and the proliferation of stereotypes. All of these maintain neocolonial power relations as capitalist societies groom publics to treat ideas, information, and popular culture as mere commodities. But as we envision the world we want, we must explore how media can emancipate publics to create an in-common and humane consciousness. To do that work, we're welcoming Dr. Jared Ball. Jared A. Ball is a professor of communication and Africana studies at Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland, and author of The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power. Second edition launching July 1st, I see on the screen. Ball is also host of the podcast, I Mix What I Like, co-founder of Black Power Media, which can be found at blackpowermedia.org. And his decades of emancipatory journalism, media, writing, and political work can be found at imixwhatilike.org. Ball has also been named as one of 2020's Marguerite Casey Foundation's Freedom Scholars. Welcome, Dr. Ball. We are really happy to have you here with us.
No, it's a pleasure, and I appreciate being invited back. It's an honor. Thank you all very much.
Let me say this next. Of course, I always forget to introduce myself, right? So I'm Youssef, right? Member of the JoCo Collective, and you're joined by the other members of the JoCo Collective, Tasha and Mila. Right. And so let me say that first, right? Because I'm notorious for not introducing myself. It's just launching into stuff. Let me send a real quick message, and then, yeah, we will launch?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Please call me
Okay.
Jared. Yeah,
Absolutely.
and absolutely. Please.
Cool.
Yeah.
Right on, Jared. Well, let me say, I followed your work for years, right? I cannot remember how I first found it, but it was Vox Union. I do remember that, right? And you were
Wow, that's
doing
the
Jazz and Justice,
beginning.
right?
Yeah.
Yes. So I've been following your work since then, right? So I've been, I found some of your interviews at that time were great for me, like during a period like now when I'm grading papers. And that's something I have on in the background to accompany me while I'm grading papers. So I've appreciated your work on many levels for a very long time. So really happy to have you here. But we'll, get me out of the way now and we'll just launch right into the questions.
Sure. No, I appreciate that.
So first question, right? What do you think we need to understand about the uses of public relations as tools of neocolonialism, including the internal neocolonialism that communities experience like ours here in the United States?
So, well, first, I mean, first of all, the outline or the summary definition you gave of media and its purpose was right on. So specific to that question, I mean, the first thing I think we need to understand about public relations is that it is itself a euphemism developed to specifically mask the use of the word propaganda, which is itself often connected to, by design, to a variety of other euphemisms, including mass communication, branding, marketing, advertising, psychological warfare. What are some other ones? Entertainment, intellectual warfare, worldview warfare, multiple force messaging, full spectrum dominance. These are literally, I'm not just being hyperbolic. I'm not just making this up. These are literally used in a variety of spaces as euphemisms, depending on who they're talking to or what the specific audience or situation is. But all of them are meant to refer to and be put to, again, by design, going back to the foundation of this country and more concretely after the Second World War, to manipulate and shape the public opinion, another phrase, of a majority of the population. It is part and parcel of warfare. It's meant to be, as some have argued, at the time when this was written, the fifth arm of the military. So that's how we need to understand what's going on here. It is not simply the sale of a product or the marketing of an entertainment product or some news or entertainment. It is all designed to work on a variety of levels to defend the colonial project, to the settler colonial project, capitalism, white supremacy, and the like. So I know a lot of times, from students to people in YouTube comments, people tell me all the time, and those who think like me, that we're doing too much or we're overthinking it. But the reality is, this is what those in power who have created this environment have said in a variety of ways over a variety of years is their mission. This is their defined purpose. So the fact that to the extent we don't recognize that or accept it, not in terms of allowing it or whatever, but recognize that is their intent. To the extent that we don't do that, we're going to always be confused. Or as Neely Fuller said, about white supremacy, we'll never. Well, now I'm forgetting the exact quote, but we will always be confused. You will stay confused without an understanding of how this all works. So anyway.
What are some of those sources? Some of those elites who are straightforward about the role of this mediated content?
Well, I was just looking at the other day. I mean, George Creel, who was hired to promote North America's entrance into the First World War, said when he was reflecting on how successful he was, that he said the purpose was to conquer the convictions of the populace. And I've always been struck by that phrase. You know, when you think about what is a conviction of yours or ours or anyone's, to conquer it means that you are basically making it impossible for that person to act outside of what you define as acceptable. So it's true dominance.
Mhm.
But it's basically it's Rockefeller, it's Carnegie, it's the military extension of those folks. It's the Dulles brothers. It's the founders of the intelligence community. It's the founders of the field of mass communication. I always talk about Chris Simpson's great work, The Science of Coercion, which is just one of a few good pieces on this history that really identify and lay out the intent here by the political, military, and economic elite of this society, the colonial ruling elite of this society, to construct a media environment that would conquer the convictions of the population and would make the likelihood of rebellion internally less likely. Herbert Aptheker wrote about it as the machinery of control, in terms of the way the press was used by the even pre-Civil War ruling elite in an attempt to suppress African rebellion among the enslaved, using the press and the newspaper and imagery and all that. So again, from before, as someone put it, this is always the goal. It is a military, as McLuhan said, advertising is a vast military operation, and we need to understand it as such. Yeah.
Yes. Again, it's called a campaign, right? And
there you go.
I thought that was a military term, right? To wage
exactly. How about that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I've been thinking about that. Entertainment, right? Is being my father's son. And he loved John Wayne movies, right? So he used to watch lots of John Wayne movies growing up. And so I've been watching them lately because they've been playing a lot of old John Wayne movies, 1930s.
Wow.
And you can see the political work, though, of the film, right? Just like, you know, this laying out of the settler colonial project, right? But there's this heroic mission, right? And it's fascinating to watch. And you can the political work of the early John Wayne films, and that what was it, Republic Pictures, right? You can see the political work going on in the films, and they're entertaining, right? They're exciting, right? They aren't all that well made, right? Low budget early John Wayne movies, but they're exciting, and you can see how they can. I can just see how it helps shape a consciousness of what America is supposed to be, and who the pioneers were, et cetera, right? So it's always doing political.
I forgot, I'm sorry, I've forgotten all the work done on this, but there have been, not even too long ago, there's been some work that talks about what most people think they understand about cowboys is itself a construction of that time period.
Yeah,
the actual cowboys had nothing to do with what we see in films. John Wayne is not an accurate representation of a cowboy. Not the least of which is that many were black, but you know, that we also didn't see it in those films. But this whole idea of what they were is a total fantasy.
Exactly. A total taking its history, though, right? People read film like it's history.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No. I was you know, I often think about, you know, that reading film is history, and what's his name? Everybody's favorite president who was horrible, Reagan.
Oh, right. I was trying to say which one.
You know, citing some heroic thing, right, that had happened, and it was a film, right, and he had mixed up the reality and the film, thinking that it was history, right? And that was the sitting president at the time. But let's go on to the second question.
Sure.
And so this is from your 2014 interview when I Mix What I Like, a mixtape manifesto came out. the
Okay.
with Dr. Stephen Ferguson.
Oh, wow,
Now,
right.
so full disclosure, right? I use your chapter, Media as Ideology, Culture, and Colonialism in my composition class.
Oh, thank you.
It's
Right
part of
on.
our media set. And so I'll share that video with the class also. And partly because for a lot of the students, they're first year students, right? So it's a little heavy for them, although somebody always presents it, right? There's always a student who steps up and yeah, I'll present it. But then the interview helps break it down, a little more plain. So in that interview, right, you describe Jay-Z and Russell Simmons and the Black Republicanism in hip hop, or that set of values. So where are we in that process, right? This growing embrace of capitalist solutions and entrepreneurial values in hip hop. Where are we in that process 9 years later after that? And can you discuss that in terms of the myth of and propaganda of Black buying power?
Sure. And I think it's important because Ferguson didn't agree with me. So I think, and it's good to have that exchange because he's sharp for sure. So it's worse. The short answer is it's worse. It's continued on unfettered and worse. So as I mentioned in the second edition, Jay-Z, as others I'm sure saw, I was on Twitter not long ago and said, don't call me a capitalist, when in responding to some critique of him being described as a Black capitalist, and he was saying that was akin to being called the N-word.
Mm.
And he was saying, not to say that he, in the sense to defend himself as a Black capitalist, he was saying, don't try to disparage me with that N-word equivalent label when I am in fact happy to be a Black capitalist. I'm in fact demonstrating the victory. And if we add to it, using Jay-Z as an example, in that 9-10 year window, he also became a spokesperson for entrepreneurialism and business ownership versus Colin Kaepernick and political activism.
Mm-hmm.
When he was brought in by the NFL under the mirage or the hallucination of ownership, to say we need to move past taking a knee and get into the owner's box. Well, of course, this is what he did in Brooklyn by taking a less than 1% ownership in the Nets to help gentrify Brooklyn and bring in white majority ownership into that community. So it's worse is essentially the point. And capitalism and Black capitalism as a subset have had to have much more propaganda targeting its promotion, particularly after COVID, when many people started raising new questions, rightly so, about how the economy works and what is the relationship of labor, what is the relationship of our healthcare, et cetera, and so forth. So there's been more propaganda looking to project and present it as a viable solution. And I think, yeah, and then I also don't think, I was trying to come up with something funny to say about, which is really not a funny point, about why Russell Simmons is hiding in Belize, I think, or Bali rather, to avoid a potential prosecution for alleged sexual assault, abuse, et cetera, and so forth. When he rose to prominence promoting Black capitalism as a solution, helping commercialize and commodify rap music and hip hop culture, and Black culture, and promoting this mythology of serenity and calm and yoga and peace and just entrepreneurialism and all this other kind of nonsense, while he's literally allegedly abusing women, exploiting Black artists, and then running off with all of his wealth and riches to another country, never to be seen or heard from again, potentially. All that to say that missing the joke I couldn't find. The point being that in the promotion of all of this Black capitalist fantasy, the reality is Black people still get caught up in exploitative relationships, are forced to run for the hills, whether literally to Bali or figuratively behind the false garment of Black capitalism. When the reality is their community is economically, materially, politically worse off. I want to argue that maybe in some ways than ever, given the absence of consciousness, the absence of struggle, and the retrenchment of the fascism that has already been here. George Jackson was right 50 years ago. So I mean, anyway, I hope there was something you can work with in there.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been buying Black for as long as I can remember, trying to buy Black, and realizing that it ain't really transforming the community, but I'll still keep going to Black merchants, whenever I can, right?
Sure.
But recognizing, right, and and also recognizing that many of them hire immigrants also, right, because they want to pay less, right? Don't want to pay union wages. I mean, so yeah. So what about a new progressive revolutionary musical underground? Are you tuned into anything like that?
No, I think I'm too far removed and not enough in tune with. I mean, I'm aware of what are still my favorite artists, but I don't know to what extent they reflect or are connected themselves to something deeper. So like Marcel P. Black or Cornel West Theory or Mumu Fresh or people like that. But so all I think safely logically conclude without having the evidence is that it exists. I'm just not as plugged in as I once was, and am not aware of it. But there's always going to be some form of an underground that is politically and culturally unsanctioned. I'm just not aware of as much about where it is at this point.
There's a certain thing that happens when beard gets a little gray. Yes.
I mean, I was honest, I've told my students this and and my children, with all due respect. I mean, it's just at this point, even if I agree with the content, I'm not really interested in hearing young adults express themselves to saying what I would have once said or been interested in, or I'm still interested in, but it's their time. They're not talking to me. I'm not hating. I'm just saying and then when it does turn to something romantic or sexual, I don't really want to, I wouldn't want to watch a teenage romance film at this point. I don't, I don't want to watch kids falling in love. I don't need to hear kids rhyming about it either. So on some level, it's just that I just, I'll listen to an old song from my youth today, but in the back of my mind, I'm saying that person, to the extent, unfortunately, that, unfortunately, so many have passed on, but to the extent that they're still alive, I'm saying at least we were both that age when this song came out.
Yeah. I feel you. We had a slow jam party last night, 70s, 80s slow jams. Right
on.
Right. So,
so that's all I mean is on some level, I know it sounds worse than I mean for it to sound. I just don't think I'm like, young people are talking to other young people. I
don't think it sounds that bad, but then I'm not young either. So,
and some of it, I mean, I do. I've said so part of what I do in my hip hop classes in particular is I ask for students and assign students actually to submit music that they're listening to. So I'm almost forced to, so I can acknowledge that, for instance, I've said I think overall, content notwithstanding, the rhyme cadence today is far more sophisticated in most tracks where the MC is trying to rhyme. I mean, a lot of cats are just trying to, you know, put out a vibe or some noise or a hook, or they're just whatever. But when people are actually trying to rhyme, it's far more sophisticated. It's and then, you know, so I get there's been an evolution in but I miss the boom bap. I miss a certain style of production. I miss a certain style of sampling, which almost by definition can't be done anymore legally. I miss, you know, and then as I was saying, at the end of the day, you know, there's only so much, you know, Young Love, shout out to Slick Rick, that I can listen to. You know, at this point, and I'm good, you know. And I'm just in general, I keep joking, like I'm at the point, I'm like, I just want, you know, I don't want, even for my age group, I want no more public discussion of romance and sex. I want everybody put their clothes, more clothes on. I'm becoming really retrograde. Just give me a story, some acting, some, you know, give me everybody put like Malcolm said about religion, I want everybody to put their overt, this is not a commentary on LGBTQ or anything. I don't want to be misunderstood. I want everybody to put their sexuality, put it all. That's what I'm looking for. All everybody PDAs. Go back, put that, leave that somewhere, and then
that's
everybody put on another layer of clothing.
That's right. It's not this, that, or the other. Just.
But I also want to say, like, I recognize, like, on some level, I am becoming a cliche of an older person. So I don't want to hate in that way. I don't mean to, you know, I just, you know, so that's all. I don't know.
Tasha has an interesting question in the chat. We can go, you know, given
sure.
the penetrable nature, right, of digital content, what would it mean to be underground these days? Anyone can hear everything, right?
Well, to me, so I guess by underground, that's a very good point. I would define it by sort of in the same way, anything that's not sanctioned by the established institutional order. So, you know, because it's true that any of us can put something online, but it's not true that presence is all equal. When you have, you know, algorithm support and marketing support and, you know, a record company that's going to hire fake bots and hire fake likes and all that stuff to promote you, it's different. Right. And to get, an underground artist is not likely to have their song attached to an internationally distributed soccer, you know, video game, or to be put in a movie. Like that's so, but yes, Tasha makes a very good point.
Yes. So let's move on, right? Think a little historically about media. What era, moment, or event in sovereign Black media production do you think is or has been most effective in political ideation and mobilizing in the community?
That's a good question.
And there could be more than one era, moment, or period.
So I don't, that's a very good question. I'm gonna pick some favorites, and then we'll leave it up for debate if how right it is. But I think just some highlights when I think of David Walker's Appeal and it as a representation of, because he himself was a journalist, of underground journalism, of an attempt, you know, he came out of Cornish and Russworm's Freedom's Journal background. You know, he comes out of that. But if I think of that as an example, sort of a pinnacle of Black radical underground autonomous journalism and what it represented and how it was carried around by variations of enslaved and relatively free Africans to distribute it, and the threat it represented in being, you know, a death sentence if you were found with it, similar to what I think of, you know, I was gonna say when it comes to, you know, Blood in My Eye by George Jackson. though not part of an autonomous Black independent sovereign, you know, but the threat it represents in terms of a distributed message and movement. Or if I thought about Mabel and Robert Williams doing Radio Free Dixie, or and that sort of radical broadcasting from Cuba into the southern United States, and the encouraging rebellion and the way they recount the story of one of Ho Chi Minh's lieutenants telling them that the Tet Offensive in Vietnam was inspired by one of their underground pamphlets. What was the name of their? Now I can't remember but the written equivalent of Radio Free Dixie, their newsletter, had made it to Vietnam somehow, and they said that the Tet Offensive, that they were inspired to come out of the jungles and engage in urban guerrilla warfare because of those underground.
That's a great story. I never heard.
I love that story.
Yes.
Now, so it's on now this is also, now this is interesting. So if you go to the Freedom Archives, I just happen to have the CD, I look at this every day, and get this, the story is told here.
Okay.
But if you get the PBS version,
yeah,
where the late great Mabel Williams told me off the record during one of our interviews, because I said, that story's not on the PBS version. And she said they made her take it out.
Look at that.
That's what I'm talking about.
There it is, right. PBS.
That's what I'm talking about. So that's why, you know, shout out to the Freedom Archives. You got to get that, you know, but anyway, so I don't you know, the Intercommunal News Service, the Black Panther newspaper, the you know, and shout out to even the network of Black radio that was even somewhat commercial, right, but still played a very important role to the civil rights movement and other parts of the struggle. I like to include both three things: the Go-Go PA tape, shout out to Go-Go Music, those live recordings, that unsanctioned, raw, the best pocket in the world. But also the lecture tapes that used to circulate in Black communities on VHS and cassette, all throughout the 80s and 90s. And then also, what was my third? What was my third? The cassette, the mixtape, and then, oh my goodness, I just lost it. Whatever, there was a third one. It'll come back to me. But all of these were, and variations of them were essential to inspiring and encouraging a variety of efforts. And oh, now that's going to bother me the rest of the night. My bad. Dang, there was another component to that.
When you remember, if you don't remember before we're done, you can email it.
I'll email you.
Yeah, right, we will make sure it's shared.
All right. Thank you very much.
But I'm glad you shared. I mean, so that story about the Tet Offensive, I mean, it just makes it clear why they don't want Black folks here hooking up, right? Or getting the story out, or right? There it is. Okay, you know, speaking of party politics, because like I said, right, I've followed your work for a while. You know, I found it useful for my work, right? So I know that one time you were a member of the Green Party and you ran for was it vice president?
Well, I briefly ran for the nomination. For the nomination,
right?
Yeah,
right. But I've also heard in some recent interviews and conversations you've had, you know, watching Black Power Media. I'm a subscriber.
Thank you.
Hey, you know, I skipped the question about platforms, but you know, that's an important platform. So I know I've heard you mention, though, now being a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. So you know, when we were talking among ourselves about what questions we wanted to ask, that was a question I had, right? You know, what was that journey for you? from the Green Party, and not even specifically from the Green Party, but just to the All African People's Revolutionary Party?
Well, that wouldn't be the best way to describe it, because in fact, I had at one point begun my engagement in a semi-official and unofficial capacity with the AAPRP before the Green Party in the early 2000s. So I wouldn't say that it was from one to the other. I would say one was meant to be, the Green Party was really, for me, meant to be, and still is to a certain extent, meant to be an electoral outlet for a politics that are still, for me, grounded in what the AAPRP's analysis of the world is. So it's not that. And really, it's again, similar to George Jackson and others. My point is to be a disruptive element within electoral politics, and even my approach with the Green Party, again, maybe mistakenly, naively, was to turn the party into a red, black, and green party to sort of try to blend those politics a little bit more, to just simply say, and again, so many people, even committed radical Africans, get caught up in electoral politics and get caught up in the grandeur of the propaganda of it all, the hype of it all, and end up engaging on some level, whether it's to vote or to make an argument for this or that candidate or this and that. And so my point is, if that's going to happen anyway, we should, as Kwame Ture was encouraging in other areas, if we know something's going to happen eventually, we should plan and organize for it. So that's really my only point. Instead of just waiting for us to start scrambling every election cycle to say, why don't we engage a little earlier and build something with it, even if it's just a radical consciousness that can maybe turn into something else.
Right.
So that was my thinking. It is still my thinking. But yeah, so it's not one to the other. It's the AAPRP best represents my worldview. It, but to my knowledge, does not have an overt mandate or call around engaging in electoral politics. So I start with that worldview, and then the Green Party exists as an entity that I think, or I thought then, could become a mechanism for an AAPRP worldview in that arena. Yeah, that's the, it's for sure flawed, but that is sort of my approach to it. Okay,
that's all I was asking for, some clarification, right? So
okay, Dan, no problem.
Tasha's got another interesting follow-up question. What do you think's the disruptive potential of Cornel West run?
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure that out. I mean, I think there is some, given his notoriety and his skill. I mean, he's no sucker, even if we don't agree with everything. He's capable of engaging and making a good argument. So I think his notoriety, his skill level, his celebrity, my joke, he was in the Matrix, you know what I'm saying? Like,
right. Yeah, he was. Yes, he was.
And we got to think about, I mean, on some level, I mean, that, again, I certainly sometimes forget what celebrity really is and how it works, even as I'm a critic of it and a student of it. And that in this world will mean a lot, even if it just means he's going to get that much more 10 seconds of someone listening to him. And he might make something happen. So I do think he has a potential to be somewhat disruptive. As I've said before, I will continue to say, if he had started earlier, if he continues to plan beyond this election cycle to build on what he starts here, I think it could become even something maybe even approaching exciting. I mean, it's hard for me to get too excited at this point about the potential, but I can't think of anyone better in terms of a blend of popularity and competency with the politics. remember there was at one point people were talking about that Oprah should run in the Democratic Party, or The Rock should run, or some other maybe bigger name celebrity, but their politics are never going to be as close to good as West's are.
No, they won't.
And similarly, no one
They said
coming
The
out
Rock,
of
as in
at
Dwayne
one point a
Rock.
couple of years ago, Wayne, a couple of years ago, his
Okay.
name, maybe a year ago, there was a moment where because people were concerned, like going forward, how are we going to stop Trump again after the Biden thing? And they were like, well, we need a celebrity of we can't count on a Biden to win again.
Right.
So Oprah's name, Dwayne Johnson's name, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is desperation.
That is desperation.
And as famous as they are, it would be maybe mildly interesting from like a car crash viewing perspective, but politically it would be just an atrocious mess. But at least with West, and as I was saying, like coming out of the Green Party or radical or alternative wing of politics, there's nobody as popular as Cornel West. So this is as interesting as I think we can see,
So I have a follow-up to the follow-up.
Sure.
Because I'm thinking about it, that potential could be there depending on how it plays out, right? So I'm also wondering about Cornel's potential to once again sheepdog for the Democrats.
So he's not running as a Democrat and currently not advocating. Now, that was a question that when we interviewed him the other day, because he was late, we ran out of time. That was one of the questions we didn't really get a chance to, I don't remember it fully being brought up or fleshed out. Like, what do you, I think Kamau asked him though, something akin to that. Like, would you, anyway, I don't remember exactly now, but I feel like we didn't really get to flesh that out with him. What would you do if when you lose, as Kamau was saying, and when you, what then? And he was hesitant to accept that possibility, so I'm less like, anyway, I said that to say, I don't think he is as likely as Bernie because he's not running within that party. And he represents a politics that party, he's even far left of Bernie. So and they destroyed him. The DNC destroyed Bernie. So I can't see, I can't see it. I hope not. And I would certainly want to be part of the loud set of voices condemning it if he did go in that direction. I don't think it's likely, but.
Okay. So thinking about the goals of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, right? That most articulate with your vision of what the world should be. How does the practice of emancipatory journalism serve as a tool in that process for you?
Again, well, simply put, emancipatory journalism is the practice of an unobjective, biased journalism and media making supposed to be from within organized movements for radical change, meant to support those movements.
So from within the movements.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. That's the point. That the journalism should be produced from within. So it's not to say that other outlets and entities can't produce something of value here and there, but emancipatory journalism is specifically saying that those engaged in revolution need to be producing their own journalism and media with the specific goal of not just informing on a specific issue, but increasing the ranks of the movement. So it's essential. So, and again, going back to the very first question you asked, it can take any form going in reverse. So it can be, from my understanding, emancipatory journalism could be plays, theater, can be entertainment, can be documentaries, can be straight news, can be films, can be songs, can be art, can be the point, again, as long as it's produced from within these movements to enhance these movements and represent those movements, that's the point. And I think more that's so it move this no struggle from my understanding could survive or thrive or work without this being a component.
So that's really, because that really takes me back to the earlier discussions, right, about the euphemisms, right, that you listed off, and the really kind of exploding the myth of a so-called free press and an independent press, right, that is somehow disinterested politically.
I asked, so one of my favorite moments in grad school, and shout out, I don't know if he's still living, but shout out to Professor Ray Hebert for this. I got to give him credit. I've always thought about this. A white dude, professional journalist in mainstream media. And we were in a class one day and talking about the Cuban Revolution. And he talked about how he had covered it at the time. I think he was a young kid at the time or whatever. And he was critical of it. And he said that he was like, Castro got rid of the free press. And I remember I asked Hebert this question. I said, but imagine you were coming from his perspective. And I remember I went through the whole thing. He let me run through it. I was like, you're on the Grandmama with 82 comrades. All but 12 of them get wiped out. You get tortured. Your blood is literally, and I saw it, your blood is literally still stained into the concrete in that one torture room in I forget the location, but they left it there to remind people of the torture that he and others suffered in that room, where he said, history will absolve me, that famous quote. And I went through this whole thing with Hebert, and I said, imagine you finally overcome all of this and win the revolution. Are you really going to just open up your press system to every CIA agent and every capitalist and every Batista apologist? You just finished lining them up and shooting them. Let's be real.
That's right.
Let's be real.
Yeah.
Are you then going to turn around and give them a column in your paper to condemn the revolution and beg the CIA to come in here and take? And even Hebert, to his credit, he was like, no. He understood. I mean, he got it in that moment. Like, he went on to be still critical of the idea of getting rid of a free press. He always wanted it, but the point that I was trying to get him to is there's never been a free press.
Right.
The First Amendment in this country will only get you so far. For all the talk that they talk about, what free press? I mean, that was whoever got the most money and the most power, that's freedom. And everybody else, So anyway, it's a complete misnomer, much like all the other narratives associated with this country's history. It's false and misleading and incomplete and upside down, and the 9 out of a 6, the 6 to 9, whatever it is, it's all backwards. So that's just another one. But I got to give him credit. I always loved that moment. It was one of my favorite classroom moments. Like, like what would you really do? Like, what would you
really do?
Like was George Washington and them going to turn over the press to the British after they? I mean, seriously. I mean, come on. I mean, one of my favorite books is Slavery and Propaganda, which is about how the white founders used the concept of slavery only in relationship to their experience with the British, not what they were doing to Africans, to get themselves free,
right? To
get whites to join the revolution. So, I mean, they weren't trying to hear from David Walker. They weren't trying to hear, or whoever the equivalent was in the century before. They weren't trying to hear Russ Werman Cornish.
Right.
Or again, whoever they were a century before, the enslaved in the corners of the plantation, whispering revolution and rebellion. Nobody was trying. We used to joke about that in classes too. Like, if you go back to 1830 or 1720 as a journalist, you're gonna go to the enslaved in the field and then get the balanced, objective opinion of the master. Right. And then come back to the 21st century and say, well, the master said it was pretty good. And the enslaved said it was pretty bad. Well, I really don't know. I guess we just gotta,
Both
you
sides.
decide as a reader.
Yes.
Get out of here. Anyway, sorry, Tasha's bringing us back on.
Yes,
track.
yes, I know, because Tasha's real good at that. What's that, Tasha? Linking back to this notion of media shaping common consciousness. How do you measure the capacity and actual success of our radical media platforms to affect communities, attitudes, understandings, et cetera, these days?
It's another great question. The only assessment I really ever have, my only real standard is the political behavior of the communities in question. So if we're talking about Black people here, then what is the level as I could assess it of political struggle? And that is going to be reflective of the media that is environmentally wrapping that audience. So I don't think we're in good shape. So that's why, BPM, part of what we were trying to do or are trying to do with that is to create a new public sphere. We need to, the goal is that we need not all to agree, but we need more people coming to community with each other as opposed to independent, isolated operators in these media spaces, and to try to magnify our impact to reach at least more of those. From my perspective, we're not all on the same page here, but from my perspective, to reach people who are already somewhat committed to some sort of change. I'm not really trying to reach the masses. I'm not competing with Disney and all of that. I'm saying, but to say the point being to create, anyway, to try to create something that can magnify and create a bigger impact. But that's really how I try to measure. That's how I measure although measure the capacity and actual access. Yeah, that's the only way I can do it. And it's not good. We don't have a lot of access and we don't have a lot of capacity. Right,
because even the social media, I mean, it's not reaching the kinds of audiences that broadcast television or cable television. And even in terms doesn't meet the broadcast numbers.
And then even exactly. And then even when we're talking about sort of alternative outlets, it's those who are already favored by the algorithm and advertisers who get, so in terms of my own focus work, like the biggest pushers of Black capitalism as a solution, they're not on mainstream television per se, but they're dominant in YouTube and other social media spaces because they are supported by the algorithm, they're supported by advertisers, they're supported by celebrity. So in other words, and their impact is massive. And to sort of Tasha's question, my measurement for that is a lot of this in terms of is based on students who come into my classes, who almost exclusively come from working and lower class Black communities. And when we talk about their media environment, it's that's the group. It's, this podcast, YouTube. It's not CNN or MSNBC and all of that. It's their, I guess, their unofficial subsidiaries, right? The Black subsidiaries that, man, and we need, I don't know. I honestly don't know exactly what to do. I do. I just don't know how to put it together, and I don't know how to say it and talk about it without getting us all in trouble. But we need more interruptive. Yeah. More interruption, more disruption in the work that we're doing. I mean, I used to fantasize about the mixtape being a violent reclamation of media space, like that it's like an aggressive intervention. And we need, I don't know, we need some version of that today, some organized version of that today.
So we're coming to the end, right? We have a couple of questions left, and I think you kind of started answering this one. as you know, we're looking at this moment we're living in where the backlash is real and energized. You know, the attacks on various types of curriculums that are considered to be too woke, quote unquote. The you know, parents showing up at various like school board meetings, you know, governors and a lot of the red states, right, you know, making it illegal to teach certain things. So in your own work, right, your own work, you know, how are you navigating these attempts to suppress radical revolutionary perspectives in your own academic work?
Well, first of all, we have to be real. My academic production is, what's a charitable word? Limited, maybe.
Limited is the way of putting it.
I mean, you know, look, I got to be
Compared
real.
to
Like, I
others,
mean, I'm not.
know.
My academic production is at this point slowed. How about that? Is that maybe that's a better? But in general, academically or otherwise, I don't know that I would recommend this tactically to anyone else, but it's just been, I have made my arguments the best I could make them in as organized, a clear way as I could. I don't think I've really reached the mark I would have liked to on that, but and I just let and that's it. I had also predetermined that this would be how my career would go, even as I admit to sometimes being a little naive about what that was actually going to feel like 20, 30 years in. But anyway, the point is, I had an expectation of where I was, so that that part is easy. The difficult part is in at times what that means. It sometimes means not being taken seriously enough and having even spaces that should be more welcoming of your argument reject it. It has sometimes just meant an omission or a marginalization, certainly a lack of pay. But I don't know. So, but I've at least wanted to be able to say that if whatever I've left as a document is a more or less accurate and honest reflection of what I think is going on and what needs to happen. And I'm not, with few exceptions, I'm not limiting myself on what I think needs to be said. And then, you know, and then I go to BPM and I come here and so that's, but in terms of academically, it's hasn't been much, and it hasn't, but it's been what I've wanted to say, and with those relative consequences.
Yeah, I mean, you know, not everybody is Dr. Gerald Horne that just pumps out the work. Like,
no, I mean, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know how. I literally can't even imagine, if you can follow the logic there, how he does what he does. I can't even conceive of being that productive. So just got to tip your hat and
amazing. It is it's
call it a
absolutely
day.
amazing.
And Greg Levy, what's up? Shout out to you too. What's going on? Thank you, Tasha, for relaying that. Yeah,
Yeah. Hey,
so I figured, look, I'm doing my job by being as unproductive as I am to make him stand out even more. So I'm, he's welcome. Gerald Horne, you're welcome.
He appreciate
Otherwise, you know what I mean? If we all, if we all the GOAT, then there ain't no GOAT. So that's I'm doing you a favor.
That's
I'm
That's right. Yeah. So we have a final question for you.
Sure.
So, right, this whole series is really about the world we want to get to, right? The world we want, a more just world, more balanced world, etc. Right. So what is the role of mass media in the world we want, if there is still such thing as mass media in the world we want? And what is its role on the way to getting there?
So I like the way you asked that, because I don't think mass media has no role in us getting there unless it's providing us a record that is to be critiqued so that we understand, you know, mass media can only be in service of what exists as power, dominant narratives, accepted realities, definitions, etc. Only alternative, underground, or emancipatory journalism can help us produce a different world. So to the best we can, it has to try to reflect a lot of things, both what we need to do to organize to change it, but it also does, and this is where I know my work is lacking, it has to provide us with an idea of what the world will look like, or what we're trying to build. Most of my work is only like on that first half. I'm just trying to, you know, knock off some myths, you know, clear the brush, the intellectual brush, so to speak, and then help others figure out the next step. But a world, you know, when I try to think of it just simply, I mean, our media needs to reflect the reality that we have already produced the wealth that the world needs. We have already produced the work and the labor. And I don't just mean historically through our ancestors. I mean today, you, me, everyone watching this, we have already done the work necessary for this society to have what it needs and to keep going. It needs to be redistributed. It needs to be better planned and organized. It needs to be done eventually with less exploitation and harm to humanity and the planet, et cetera, and so forth. But that's the kind of world I start to, you know, what would it, and it's even hard for me to fantasize about that sometimes, you know, if you try to really think about how a society would work beyond the Wakanda. You know, like when I ask my students, like when you see all the pretty people walking down the street in Wakanda, what is the economy? Who's cleaning the streets? Who built the streets? How did they get the resources to build to turn the streets into streets? Who's working in the shops? Do they get to go home? You see them, and you see them quickly as they're walking by like little bodegas with bags and stuff for sale. Who's working in there? Do they have health care? Do they, like, what is, you know, like when you start to think of it, like, how do you start to answer those questions? Just even as a thought exercise while stuck in traffic. Like, how do you, well, I want a world where, okay, if someone has to work in the bag store, if that has to happen all day, well, then they need to be able to go to a very nice, comfortable home, have plenty of time with their family. They have to have health care. They have to have good food to eat. So then how are we going to get all that good food to eat? Who's going to produce all that work and labor? How are they going to be compensated? Because we're not going to start enslaving people again and sharecropping again, right? So how is this going to work? How is all this new technology going to help us while not destroying labor, but making labor more relaxed? Like, we're supposed to be chilling. We're not supposed to be getting replaced by robots so that we don't have a home. We're supposed to get replaced by robots so our home runs better for, you know what I'm saying? That's if it's anyway. So that's why I appreciate to the extent I've engaged Afrofuturism. But it's also what I like about the way even materialists are starting to ask more questions about how do we really move from this world to something else? And that's what our media needs to reflect more and help us. What kind of social history? Tasha's hilarious.
That's a good one, right?
Yeah.
All right.
No, like a people's history of Wakanda would be a great, like bit of, what do they call it? Historical fiction. When people do, you know, take something that could be historical. I don't know, maybe you know what I'm saying. Like, what if you did a people's history of Wakanda? What would that look like? That's actually, you know what?
That's a good idea. It really does sound like an article somebody needs to write. Yeah. And there's and the somebody's on the Zoom
or co-write
or co-write. Okay. That's all right. A social history. I guess you got. I guess some background reading would be okay if you've read the Black Panther series and stuff. That could help too, right? Be informed. Y'all ain't busy.
Donnie,
what
give it, yeah.
Tasha
Oh, we
Wade?
gonna get, oh, she said, y'all. Where's
Right,
Tasha
right,
in
yeah,
this
yeah,
equation?
yeah.
She,
Tasha.
where is
That's right. That's right.
Tasha's the only one busy, apparently, I guess. All right, okay.
Only, yes, that's right. All the time, every day.
Oh.
So that brings us to the end of our prepared questions. I know we've had some follow-ups in the chat. Are there any other questions from the chat or from the YouTube chat that y'all are monitoring? Nope, that's it.
Nope,
Okay.
that's
Mila,
it.
did you have any questions? Didn't mean to put you on the spot, Mila, but I know you usually do have questions. Because if not, I think we are then done, and this was a blast.
I
Tasha, you got any
agree.
more follow-ups, Tasha?
No, she just gave us
No.
homework.
Right, homework.
Yes, I know.
That's a great idea, attractive, something that
Yes,
folks
she
can
did.
relate to, are still interested in. There's probably another sequel coming up. Good way to have
Although
people.
now that the actor that played Namor got in some trouble, I don't know what that's going to
Oh,
do
yeah,
to the
that's
production
right.
of these next films. I think I saw he
Oh.
got into some trouble, so I don't know.
Mm-mm.
He might be in that Jonathan Majors lane right now. So
Okay,
I don't
right
know.
now, yeah. That's,
I don't know.
this keeps happening.
Yeah, we'll have to
Interesting.
see. But no, I think it's. I mean, either way, I even if they don't make another movie, I think it's still going to be. I'm sure they will, but I mean, it's.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I just
they
think
will.
Tasha needs to be involved. I just don't know how we got stuck, but that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, that's
I'll
right.
check my schedule. I'll see.
Yes, you do
Mm.
that. Well, all right.
It's been an
then,
honor.
Brother
I
Peter.
appreciate you all. Thank you very much.
Hey, you're welcome. We appreciate you. This was a blast. So, as I mentioned in that original email, we want to bring you back, right, to sit on a panel with
Anytime.
Tommy Seasway. And we're also trying, I don't think we've heard back from Jackie yet, because we're trying to interview Jackie also.
Oh, really?
Don't know how, if, yes, we just haven't heard back yet from the email. And I'm not sure if we have the right email for her, though. The only one we have for her is the Lukman Nation email.
No, that should be it. I mean, I know, she's been busy with a procedure here or there and other things, so she may have missed it. But
So that's what I'm wondering, right?
If I can help
yeah.
with that, I will. Yeah.
Please do, yes, because
Mhm.
we're hoping to have her come in next, and then have the three of you back, right, for a panel discussion.
That would be great. Be an honor. Absolutely.
Great. So I believe that is it for today. We want to thank you again.
Thank you.
We see you got the book launch. You want to?
Yeah, please come through. Anybody, it's just a virtual thing. We're gonna have some fun. July 1st, 7 p.m. Saturday Eastern time, 7 p.m. Eastern time. We'll do some giveaways, some using book sales to put money in the hands of some folks doing good work. When just have some fun. People can raise questions if they or comment or critiques or whatever if they've read the book before we get there, and or show up and try to get a free book or buy a book and donate to a good cause, something like that.
Something like that. Sounds good.
Like
So
that.
July 1st, 7 p.m.
July 1st,
Eastern
7
time.
p.m.
And what's that? That's 4 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time.
There you go.
And then everything in between, y'all can figure out.
That's right.
Okay. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
You are
Thank you
very
so
welcome,
much.
YouTube folks.
Anytime.
Thank you, YouTube, for tuning in with us, and we will see you next time.
Right on.
Peace and out.